The stars looked cold and distant from the observation deck of the USS Defiant. Captain Eleanor Wright stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the darkness of space. Her ship floated silently, engines running at minimal power to avoid detection. They were deep in enemy territory where no human vessel was supposed to be. The war with the Kresh Dominion had raged for 3 years. Humans had only recently joined the Galactic Concordat, a union of 87 alien species, most with technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. But even their advanced weapons couldn't stop the Kresh, whose hive-minded warriors were conquering world after world. Eleanor turned as the door slid open behind her. First Officer Alan Garcia walked in, holding a datapad. "Status report, Alan?" she asked. "All systems are ready, Captain. The crew is at battle stations. We're still undetected," he replied. Eleanor nodded. Her crew of 320 volunteers knew they were breaking rules from both Earth Command and the Concordat High Council. Officially, the USS Defiant was listed as destroyed in an ambush near Procyon. In reality, Eleanor had taken her ship on a mission that could change everything. "And the target?" she asked. Alan brought up a holographic map. It showed a large structure orbiting a dead moon. "The Kresh Command Nexus is exactly where our intelligence said it would be. 14 enemy battlecruisers guard it." Eleanor studied the display. The Kresh ships were massive compared to the Defiant. Each one could probably destroy her vessel in seconds, if they saw her coming. "They still don't consider us a threat," she said quietly. "That's our advantage." The Concordat races had accepted human help reluctantly. They saw Earth's technology as primitive and positioned human ships far from important battles. The Kresh probably felt the same way. "Lieutenant Wilson is ready at tactical," Alan said. "Science Officer Palmer has identified the weak points in the command structure." Eleanor walked to the command deck with Alan following close behind. The crew worked quietly at their stations. The air felt tense, but focused. "Captain on deck," announced Chief Petty Officer Steve Morris. "As you were," Eleanor said. She settled into her command chair and brought up the tactical display. "Lieutenant Wilson, status of weapon systems?" Kate Wilson, a young woman with short blonde hair, responded without looking up from her console. "All systems green, Captain. Protocol Achilles is loaded and ready." Officer Palmer, final analysis of target structure. Doug Palmer, the science officer, brought up a detailed scan on the main screen. "The command nexus has a crystalline framework. Our tungsten rods should create shockwaves through the structure if we hit these junction points." He highlighted several spots on the display. Eleanor took a deep breath. What they were about to attempt had never been done before. The Kresh had advanced energy shields that could stop the Concordat's quantum weapons. But humans had been fighting each other for centuries and had developed different approaches to warfare. "The Kresh evolved in deep space," Palmer continued. "Their entire civilization developed in zero gravity with minimal radiation. They never needed defenses against the kinds of weapons used in planetary warfare." Eleanor nodded. "And that's why ballistic weapons, nuclear radiation, and electromagnetic pulses might work where the Concordat's fancy technology has failed." She looked around at her crew. They were all volunteers, men and women who believed humans could make a difference in this war despite what their more advanced allies thought. "Communications Officer Patel, any transmissions from the enemy?" Ravi Patel shook his head. "Nothing directed our way, Captain. Their communications follow normal patterns. They have no idea we're here." Eleanor stood up and addressed her crew. "I won't give a speech. You all know why we're here. The Concordat is losing this war. Billions have already died. If the Kresh Command Nexus goes down, their fleet in this sector will be directionless for hours, maybe days. That could give the Concordat forces time to regroup." She paused, looking at each face on the bridge. "If we succeed, maybe the Concordat will finally see that humans have something valuable to offer in this fight. If we fail," she shrugged, "we're already listed as dead anyway." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. "Navigation, bring us to attack position," Eleanor ordered. "Maintain stealth approach." The USS Defiant moved silently from behind the moon, approaching the command nexus from its blind side. The massive structure glowed with strange energy patterns. Around it, the Kresh battle cruisers moved in regular patrol patterns. Distance to target, 30,000 kilometers and closing, reported Navigation Officer Frank Lopez. Eleanor felt sweat on her palms but kept her voice steady. Hold course. Lieutenant Wilson, prepare to launch Protocol Achilles on my mark. Ready, Captain, Wilson replied. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet beeping of instruments. The Defiant continued its approach, still undetected by the WIAC Kresh sensors that were calibrated to find the quantum signatures of Concordate ships, not the primitive human vessel. 20,000 kilometers, Lopez announced. Firing solutions locked, said Wilson. 15,000 kilometers. Eleanor leaned forward in her chair. Target those junction points Officer Palmer identified. Maximum velocity on the rods. 10,000 kilometers. We're entering their detection range. They're starting to scan this sector, Patel warned. I think they sense something. 5,000 kilometers. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Launch Protocol Achilles. All rods full spread. The ship shuddered slightly as 20 tungsten rods, each as long as a telephone pole, shot from the Defiant's launch tubes. Accelerated to near relativistic speeds, the simple metal projectiles crossed the remaining distance in seconds. On the main screen, the crew watched as the first rod struck the command nexus. There was no explosion, no immediate visible damage. Then, 3 seconds later, the structure began to crack as shock waves propagated through its crystalline framework. Direct hits on all targeted junctions, Wilson reported, excitement in her voice. The Kresh battlecruisers began to move erratically, their formations breaking down. The nexus is going critical, Palmer said. Internal explosions detected. Their command structure is collapsing. Alan Garcia looked at Eleanor with amazement. They don't even know what hit them. Now for Phase 2, Eleanor said calmly. Though, her heart was racing. Lieutenant Wilson, target their flagship with EMP missiles. Let's see how their systems handle a good old-fashioned electromagnetic overload. As the Defiant prepared its second attack, Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. The unthinkable had happened. A single human warship, using technology the Concordate considered obsolete, had just struck a devastating blow against an enemy that had been winning the war for years. The real fight was just beginning, but for the first time humanity had proven its worth among the stars. The bridge of the USS Defiant buzzed with nervous energy as the crew watched their EMP missiles streak toward the Kresh flagship. Captain Eleanor Wright gripped the arms of her command chair, her face showing no emotion despite the dangerous situation. They had struck the first blow successfully, but the real test was coming. EMP missiles will reach target in 5 seconds, Lieutenant Kate Wilson announced from the tactical station. The missiles weren't designed to destroy the Kresh vessel. Instead, they carried a payload that would release a massive electromagnetic pulse, something the Kresh had likely never encountered before. 3, 2, 1. Impact, Wilson called out. On the main screen, there was a brief flash as the missiles struck the Kresh flagship. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the lights across the massive alien vessel began to flicker and die. Direct hit, Science Officer Doug Palmer reported, excitement clear in his voice. The EMP is working. Their systems are shutting down. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile. Status of the other Kresh vessels? Still disorganized, First Officer Alan Garcia replied. Without the command nexus, they can't coordinate. Some are moving to protect the flagship, but they're confused. Eleanor knew they had only minutes before the Kresh recovered. Communications. Officer Patel, send the encrypted burst transmission to Concordate Outpost 7. Include all our data on the attack. Ravi Patel's fingers flew across his console. Transmission away, Captain. Navigation, plot an escape course, full stealth mode. Frank Lopez nodded. Course plotted, Captain. Lieutenant Wilson, prepare a final surprise for our friends. Deploy the minefield. Wilson grinned. Deploying mines now. The Defiant released dozens of small, dark objects that drifted away from the ship. These weren't the high-tech quantum mines used by the Concordat. They were simple devices that would detect the unique energy signature of Kresh ships and detonate with a nuclear blast. Mines deployed, Captain. Take us out, Mr. Lopez. Maximum stealth. The Defiant turned slowly and began to move away from the disabled Kresh command center. Eleanor watched the tactical display as her ship slipped between the confused enemy vessels. Captain, Palmer called out suddenly. 2 Kresh cruisers are moving to intercept. I think they've spotted us. Eleanor's heart raced, but her voice remained calm. Evasive maneuvers, Lieutenant Wilson. Prepare traditional missiles, not EMPs. They're charging weapons, Wilson warned. All hands, brace for impact, Eleanor ordered through the ship-wide system. The Defiant shuddered as energy beams from the Kresh cruisers struck its shields. Shield strength at 70%, Garcia reported. Return fire, Eleanor commanded. Target their weapon systems. The Defiant launched a spread of missiles. Unlike the elegant energy weapons of the Concordat, these were old-fashioned explosives, with simple guidance systems. Direct hit on first cruiser, Wilson reported. Their weapons are still functioning but damaged. The Defiant rocked again as another energy beam struck it. Shields at 40%, Garcia called out. We can't take much more of this. Eleanor made a quick decision. Mr. Lopez, take us toward Minefield Alpha, full speed. Captain? Lopez questioned, but his hands were already moving across his console. Trust me, Lieutenant. Full speed. The Defiant surged forward with the 2 Kresh cruisers in pursuit. They're gaining on us, Palmer warned. Steady, Eleanor said. Steady. Can now, Mr. Lopez. Hard to port. The Defiant veered sharply left. The pursuing Kresh vessels, unable to react as quickly, flew straight into the field of mines the Defiant had just deployed. Multiple explosions lit up space behind them. The bridge crew watched as the nuclear devices detonated against the Kresh ships' hulls. Both cruisers heavily damaged, Wilson reported, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. They've stopped pursuit. Get us out of here, Mr. Lopez. FTL, as soon as we're clear. The Defiant sped away from the battle zone. Behind them, the damaged Kresh command nexus floated in space, surrounded by confused enemy ships and the wreckage of the 2 cruisers. We did it, Garcia said quietly to Eleanor. We actually did it. Eleanor nodded. This is just the beginning, Alan. 6 hours later, the Defiant dropped out of FTL at the edge of a system controlled by the Concordat. 3 elegant alien vessels immediately moved to intercept them. We're being hailed, Patel reported. It's Admiral Zarvex of the Concordat fleet. On screen, Eleanor ordered, straightening her uniform. The main screen lit up with the image of a tall, crystalline being. Admiral Zarvex's compound eyes seemed to flash with anger. Captain Wright, the alien's voice translated through the ship's systems. Your vessel was reported destroyed. Instead, we find you returning from unauthorized excursion into enemy territory. Explain yourself. Eleanor stood tall. Admiral, I request permission to dock with your flagship. The information we carry is too sensitive for open transmission. The Admiral was silent for a moment. Permission granted, but be warned, Captain. The penalty for disobeying direct orders is severe. The transmission ended. Garcia looked at Eleanor with concern. They might arrest us all, he said. Eleanor nodded. It's a possibility, but once they see what we've accomplished, they might change their minds. 2 hours later, Eleanor stood in the grand meeting chamber of the Concordat flagship Eternal Light. Admiral Zarvex towered over her, along with representatives from 3 other alien species. You violated direct orders, the Admiral said. You took your ship into enemy territory without authorization. Yes, sir, Eleanor replied calmly. And yet, the Admiral continued, our long-range sensors confirm that the Kresh command nexus in Sector 7 has been destroyed. Their fleet movements in that entire quadrant have become erratic and uncoordinated. Eleanor said nothing, waiting. How did you accomplish this? Asked another alien, a small blue being with 6 arms. Eleanor activated a holographic projector she had brought. It showed images of the Defiant's attack. We used weapons the Kresh weren't prepared for, she explained. Simple kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, and nuclear mines. The Kresh evolved in deep space. They never developed defenses against these kinds of attacks. The aliens watched the recording with growing interest. Primitive weapons, Zarvek said, but there was less disdain in his voice than before. Effective weapons, Eleanor corrected. The Concordat has been fighting this war with advanced technology, but perhaps that's exactly what the Kresh expected. They weren't ready for Earth's approach to warfare. The aliens spoke among themselves in their own languages. Finally, Admiral Zarvex turned back to Eleanor. Captain Wright, while I cannot officially condone your actions, I cannot ignore the results. You will not be punished. The Admiral paused. Instead, I am requesting that you share your tactical knowledge with our fleet commanders. Eleanor felt a surge of pride. I would be honored, Admiral, and I believe this is just the beginning of what humans can contribute to this war. As she left the meeting chamber, Eleanor thought about her crew and their daring mission. The Concordat had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers to galactic society. The Kresh had ignored them as irrelevant. Both had made a serious mistake. Sometimes the old ways of fighting were exactly what was needed against a new enemy, and the USS Defiant had just changed the course of the war. Word of the USS Defiant's success spread quickly through the Concordat fleet. Within days, Captain Eleanor Wright found herself leading briefings for alien commanders who had previously ignored human military advice. She stood in a large meeting room aboard the Concordat flagship Eternal Light, facing officers from a dozen different species. The Kresh have dominated this war because they anticipated your tactics, Eleanor explained, pointing to a holographic display of recent battles. Your civilizations have used energy-based weapons and quantum technology for centuries. The Kresh developed specific defenses against these approaches. A tall, insect-like commander raised one of his forearms. And you believe your primitive weapons can change this? Eleanor nodded, refusing to take offense at the word primitive. The Kresh evolved in deep space. They never experienced the kind of planetary warfare that shaped human history. They have no natural defenses or technological countermeasures against ballistic weapons, nuclear radiation, or electromagnetic pulses. Science Officer Doug Palmer stepped forward. We've analyzed the data from our attack on the command nexus. The Kresh ships didn't even recognize our weapons as threats until they struck. Their sensors are designed to detect energy signatures, not physical objects moving. At high speed, the alien commanders looked at each other, some with doubt, others with growing interest. Admiral Zarvex moved to the center of the room. I have received permission from the Concordat High Council to form a special strike force. Captain Wright will command this force with both human and Concordat vessels working together. Murmurs spread through the room. Eleanor kept her face calm, but inside she felt both pride and worry. This was a huge responsibility. My ship engineers have already begun installing human-designed weapon systems on 3 of our cruisers. The Admiral continued. We will test Captain Wright's theories in actual combat. The meeting ended with many details still to be worked out. As Eleanor left the room, First Officer Alan Garcia fell into step beside her. This is happening faster than I expected, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded. They're desperate, Alan. The Concordat has lost 28 systems in the last year alone. They're willing to try anything now. Even our primitive weapons, Garcia said with a small smile. Especially our primitive weapons, Eleanor replied. Now we need to make sure they work again. Over the next week, human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to retrofit Concordat ships with weapons that would have been considered outdated on Earth. Railguns that fired solid metal projectiles, nuclear-tipped missiles with electromagnetic pulse generators, simple but effective countermeasures like metallic chaff to blind enemy sensors. Eleanor spent most of her time working with the alien commanders who would be part of her strike force. Many were skeptical at first, but they listened. The Kresh had destroyed their worlds and killed their people. If there was even a small chance that human tactics could work, they would try. Lieutenant Kate Wilson approached Eleanor in the mess hall one evening. Captain, The Concordate engineers are having trouble with the targeting systems for the railguns. Their computers can't handle the ballistic calculations correctly. Eleanor wasn't surprised. The Concordate races have relied on guided energy weapons for so long, they've forgotten how to calculate simple ballistic trajectories. Get Officer Palmer and a team over there. Show them how we do it. 10 days after the Defiant's return, the new strike force was ready for its first mission. 9 Concordate ships, now equipped with human-designed weapons, joined the 3 human vessels that had arrived from Earth. Eleanor stood on the bridge of the Defiant, preparing to lead them into battle. Target is the Kresh staging area in the Procyon system, she told her officers during the final briefing. Intelligence reports show 47 Kresh vessels gathered there, preparing for a major assault on Concordate worlds. That's a lot of ships, Garcia said with concern. Yes, but they're not expecting us, Eleanor replied. And they certainly aren't expecting a Concordate fleet using human tactics. The strike force jumped to FTL, emerging at the edge of the Procyon system 6 hours later. Eleanor ordered her ships to maintain communication silence as they approached the Kresh staging area. They're detecting us, Palmer reported from his science station. Kresh vessels are moving to intercept. Eleanor nodded. Just as we expected, all ships prepare for Protocol Hydra. The human ships launched what appeared to be standard missiles toward the approaching Kresh vessels. As they neared their targets, the missiles split into dozens of smaller projectiles. When the Kresh activated their point defense systems, the projectiles released clouds of metallic dust and chaff, simple materials that played havoc with the Kresh's advanced sensors. Their targeting systems are confused, Wilson reported with satisfaction. They can't get a lock on our ships. Concordate vessels, move into position, Eleanor ordered through the fleet communication system. Deploy EMP generators on my mark. The elegant Concordate ships, so different in design from the boxy human vessels, moved gracefully into a formation surrounding the confused Kresh fleet. From their hulls extended new additions, simple but effective EMP generators designed by human engineers. Now! Eleanor commanded. A wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the Kresh ships. Their systems, highly advanced but completely vulnerable to this type of attack, began to fail. Lights flickered and died. Weapons went offline. Communications ceased. All ships, commence boarding operations, ordered Eleanor. This was the most daring part of her plan. No one had ever successfully boarded a Kresh vessel before, but the Concordate Marines, trained in the past week by human special forces, knew exactly what to do. Shuttles launched from the strike force ships, heading toward the disabled Kresh vessels. The Marines carried simple explosives to be placed at critical junctions that Officer Palmer had identified in his analysis of Kresh ship design. Eleanor watched the tactical display, holding her breath as the boarding operations proceeded. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. Reports began coming in from the boarding teams. Explosives planted. Marines returning to shuttles. All teams report mission accomplished, Communications Officer Ravi Patel finally announced. They're heading back to our ships. Eleanor nodded. All vessels withdraw to safe distance. The strike force pulled back. On Eleanor's command, the Marines detonated their explosives remotely. On the main screen, the crew of the Defiant watched, as Kresh ship after Kresh ship began to break apart from internal explosions. When it was over, 27 Kresh vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The strike force had lost only 2 shuttles and suffered minimal damage to their ships. Send the results to Concordate High Command, Eleanor ordered Patel. Include all tactical data and battle recordings. As the strike force headed home, Eleanor sat alone in her quarters. What they had accomplished today would change the entire war. The Concordate now had a way to fight back effectively against the Kresh, and it had been humans, the newcomers to galactic society, who showed them how. Eleanor thought about Earth and what this would mean for humanity's place in the stars. No longer would they be seen as primitive newcomers with little to offer. Today, human ingenuity had proven its worth. The unthinkable had indeed happened. A human warship and human tactics were changing the course of an interstellar war. News of the successful attack on the Kresh staging area spread through the Concordate like wildfire. Within days, requests came in from fleet commanders across dozens of systems, all asking for human military advisors and weapon designs. Captain Eleanor Wright found herself at the center of a major shift in the war effort. Admiral Zarvek summoned Eleanor to a high-level meeting on the Concordat capital world, Lumina. The planet's 3 suns bathed the crystal spires of the city in rainbow light as Eleanor's shuttle descended to the surface. She had never visited the Concordat capital before. Few humans had. The Grand Council chamber was filled with representatives from all 87 species of the Concordat. Eleanor stood tall but felt small among the various alien beings, some towering 3 times her height, others barely reaching her knees. High Counselor Ventel, a glowing energy being contained in a floating crystal shell, addressed the gathering. The reports from Admiral Zarvex have been verified. The human strike force destroyed 27 Kresh vessels with minimal losses. Since then, similar tactics have been employed in 6 other sectors, all with comparable results. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Eleanor noticed many eyes, some compound, some crystalline, some merely sensing organs that didn't look like eyes at all, turning toward her. The Kresh have begun to retreat from 3 systems they had recently conquered, continued the High Counselor. For the first time since this war began, we are pushing them back rather than simply trying to slow their advance. Admiral Zarvex stepped forward. The human weapons are effective because they are unexpected. The Kresh have already begun adapting their defenses against kinetic projectiles and electromagnetic pulses. But Captain Wright assures me that humans have many more tricks in their arsenal. Eleanor nodded when the Admiral looked at her. It was true. Humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed countless ways to overcome enemy defenses, and they were experts at adapting when old methods stopped working. The High Counselor turned to Eleanor. Captain Wright, the Council has voted to establish a joint military command. For the first time in Concordat history, a non-founding species will hold equal authority in military matters. You have been nominated to represent Earth in this command. Eleanor tried to keep her surprise from showing. This was a huge honor, one that would change humanity's place in the galactic community forever. I am honored, she replied simply. Earth stands with the Concordat. The meeting continued with discussions of strategy and resource allocation. When it ended, Admiral Zarvex approached Eleanor. You should be proud, the crystalline being said. When your ship first violated our battle directives, I nearly had you arrested. Now your tactics may save us all. Eleanor smiled. We're just getting started, Admiral. Back aboard the USS Defiant, Eleanor briefed her officers on the new developments. Earth had sent 3 more warships, along with hundreds of engineers and military advisors. All across Concordat space, alien vessels were being retrofitted with human-designed weapons. The Kresh are adapting, Science Officer Doug Palmer warned during the briefing. Our latest intelligence shows they've modified their outer hulls to absorb kinetic impacts better. They're also developing shields that can block our electromagnetic pulses. Eleanor wasn't surprised. We expected this. No advantage lasts forever in warfare. That's why we need to keep changing our approach. What's the next step? Asked First Officer Alan Garcia. Eleanor brought up a holographic map of Kresh territory. The Kresh have a major shipyard here, in the Deneb system. If we can destroy it, we'll set back their production capability for months, but they'll be expecting us to use the same tactics as before. So we need something new, Lieutenant Kate Wilson said with a smile. Eleanor nodded. Exactly. And I have an idea. 3 weeks later, a joint Concordat human battle group approached, the Deneb system. 20 ships strong, they represented the largest coordinated force yet assembled under the new Joint Military Command. Eleanor commanded from the bridge of the Defiant, which now served as the flagship for the entire group. Kresh detection systems have spotted us, Palmer reported. They're moving to intercept with 73 vessels. He looked up from his console with concern. More than we expected. Eleanor studied the tactical display. The Kresh had indeed gathered a massive force to protect their shipyard, and intelligence reports suggested they had upgraded their defenses specifically to counter human weapons. They think they're ready for us, Eleanor said calmly. but they're ready for what we did before, not what we're about to do. All ships, prepare for Operation Trojan. The battle group continued its approach, seemingly intent on engaging the Kresh fleet directly. But as they came within weapons range, Eleanor gave the command. Deploy the drones. From the cargo bays of the human ships came thousands of small, unmanned vessels, each no bigger than a shuttle. The drones sped toward the Kresh fleet, broadcasting energy signatures that mimicked those of larger ships. The Kresh sensors are confused, Palmer reported. They can't tell which are real ships and which are drones. The Kresh fleet split up, trying to engage multiple targets. Their formation broke down as individual ships chased after drones. Phase 2, Eleanor ordered. Launch the stealth bombers. 10 specially modified shuttles, their hulls coated with materials that absorbed both light and sensor scans, slipped past the distracted Kresh fleet. Each carried a payload far more devastating than anything used in previous engagements. Bombers have reached the shipyard, Communications Officer Ravi Patel announced. They're deploying the antimatter warheads now. The crew held their breath. Antimatter weapons had been deemed too dangerous by the Concordat centuries ago. But humans had convinced them that this situation warranted extreme measures. The tactical display suddenly lit up with an enormous energy reading from the shipyard. Then another. And another. All bombers report successful detonation, Patel said. They're heading back now. On the main screen, they watched as chain reactions spread throughout the massive Kresh facility. Shipyard after shipyard collapsed in blinding explosions. All ships withdraw to emergency jump points, Eleanor ordered. The Kresh fleet is regrouping. The battle group pulled back, covered by the remaining drones. The Kresh pursued, but they were too late. One by one, the Concordat and human ships jumped to FTL, escaping the system. When they emerged at the rendezvous point hours later, the tactical data was analyzed. The entire Kresh shipyard complex had been destroyed. Production capabilities that had taken the Kresh decades to build were gone in minutes. This will set them back significantly, Garcia said as he reviewed the reports with Eleanor in her ready room. Without those shipyards, they can't replace their losses quickly. Eleanor nodded. It's a major victory, but the war isn't over. The Kresh still hold dozens of Concordat worlds, and they'll adapt to these tactics too. What happens when they adapt to everything we throw at them? Garcia asked. Eleanor looked out the viewport at the assembled ships of their battle group, human vessels alongside the elegant designs of a dozen alien civilizations, all working together now. Then we'll adapt again, she said firmly. That's what humans do best, and now we've taught the Concordat to do the same. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the Kresh shipyards at Deneb. The war had changed dramatically. The Kresh, once seemingly unstoppable, had been pushed back from 14 Concordat systems. Their advance had not merely been halted, it had been reversed. Captain Eleanor Wright stood at the observation window in her quarters aboard the USS Defiant, looking out at the stars. The ship had been through dozens of battles now. Its hull bore scars from Kresh weapons hastily repaired between engagements. The crew was tired, but proud. They had accomplished what many thought impossible. A soft chime announced a visitor. Enter, Eleanor called. First Officer Alan Garcia stepped in, holding a data pad. Captain, we've received a message from Admiral Zarvex. The Kresh have requested peace talks. Eleanor turned, surprised. Peace talks? Are they serious? The Admiral believes so. Their losses have been substantial. Without their main shipyards, they can't replace their fleet quickly enough, and our latest tactics have broken through their adapted defenses. Eleanor took the data pad and read the message. The Kresh Dominion, after years of aggressive expansion, wanted to negotiate an end to the war. The Concordat High Council had agreed to meet with Kresh representatives on a neutral space station near the border between their territories. They want you there, Garcia added, as Earth's representative. Eleanor nodded slowly. When do we leave? 3 days later, the Defiant arrived at the neutral station. The structure was ancient, built by a species long extinct. Its neutral status, respected by all spacefaring civilizations. Eleanor took a small team with her. Garcia, Science Officer Doug Palmer and Lieutenant Kate Wilson. The meeting chamber was large and circular, with representatives from the Concordat already seated on one side. Eleanor recognized Admiral Zarvex and High Counselor Vental among them. The Kresh representatives sat opposite. It was the first time Eleanor had seen a Kresh up close. They were insectoid in appearance, with hard exoskeletons and multiple limbs. Their eyes were compound and faceted, revealing nothing of their thoughts. 5 of them sat at the table, perfectly still. High Counselor Vental opened the proceedings. Representatives of the Kresh Dominion, you have requested these peace talks. We are prepared to listen to your terms. The central Kresh figure rose slightly. Its mandibles clicked as it spoke, the sounds translated by devices around the room. The conflict between our peoples has reached a point of diminishing returns, the Kresh said. We recognize the unexpected effectiveness of your new tactics. Continuing this war would be inefficient. Eleanor thought how typical this response was based on what they had learned about Kresh psychology. They didn't speak of right or wrong, only efficiency and results. We propose a withdrawal from all Concordat territories conquered in the past 2 standard years, the Kresh continued. A demilitarized zone will be established along our borders. Admiral Zarvex leaned forward. And the systems you conquered, before that? The billions of Concordat citizens still under Kresh control? The Kresh representatives' mandibles clicked rapidly. Those territories have been fully integrated into our dominion. Their return is not negotiable. Eleanor saw the Admiral about to object angrily. She caught his eye and shook her head slightly. This was not the time for demands. They needed to understand their enemy better. May I ask a question? Eleanor said, addressing the Kresh directly. The Kresh turned their compound eyes toward her. The human may speak. Why did you start this war? Eleanor asked simply. The Kresh seemed confused by the question. After a moment, one replied, Your Concordat was expanding. Its technology was advancing. Analysis indicated you would eventually threaten our dominion. Preemptive action was the logical choice. Eleanor nodded. And now? What has changed in your analysis? The Kresh representative's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You have introduced unknown variables. Human warfare methods were not in our calculations. Our models can no longer predict outcomes with acceptable accuracy. Eleanor turned to Admiral Zarvex and High Counselor Vental. May I speak privately with the Concordat delegation? They moved to a separate chamber. Once alone, Eleanor explained her thoughts. The Kresh think purely in terms of logic and efficiency, she said. They started this war because their analysis showed they would win. Now they want peace because they're not sure anymore. So what do you suggest? The High Counselor asked. We need to change their calculation, Eleanor replied. Right now, they think a partial withdrawal is the most efficient option. We need to convince them that complete withdrawal is actually better for them in the long run. How? Admiral Zarvex asked. Eleanor smiled. By doing something unexpected. Again. When they returned to the meeting chamber, Eleanor addressed the Kresh representatives. We have a counter-proposal, she said. Complete withdrawal from all Concordat territories regardless of when they were conquered. The Kresh mandibles clicked rapidly, showing agitation. This is not acceptable. The resource investment in those territories will be compensated, Eleanor interrupted. The Concordat will share certain technologies with the Kresh Dominion, specifically technologies that will help you expand in other directions, away from our space. The Kresh grew very still, clearly considering this unexpected offer. What technologies? One finally asked. Eleanor nodded to Science Officer Palmer, who activated a holographic display showing schematics for deep space habitation and resource extraction systems. Your people evolved in space, Eleanor said. These technologies will allow you to build habitats and mine resources in regions that other species find uninhabitable. The void between galaxies, for instance. Places where you will never come into conflict with us again. The Kresh representatives conferred among themselves, making rapid clicking sounds. We will consider this proposal, their leader finally said. There is logic in your suggestion. After the Kresh had withdrawn to discuss the offer, Admiral Zarvex turned to Eleanor. Do you really think they'll accept? Eleanor nodded. They don't care about conquest for its own sake. They want resources and security. If we can show them a path to both that doesn't involve fighting us, they'll take it. 3 days of negotiations followed. The Creche bargained hard, but ultimately agreed to withdraw from all concordate territories in exchange for specific technologies and non-aggression guarantees. Both sides would need time to trust each other, but the foundation for peace had been laid. As the Defiant prepared to depart the station, Admiral Zarvex came to say goodbye to Eleanor and her crew. When your ship first violated our battle directives, the Admiral said, I thought humans were reckless and primitive. Now I understand that you simply see problems differently than we do. Eleanor smiled. That's humanity's greatest strength, Admiral. We've had to solve problems in many different ways throughout our history. Sometimes the old solutions work best. The High Council has formally recognized Earth as a full member of the Concordate, Zarvex said, with equal standing to founding members. That has never happened before. Eleanor thought about how far humanity had come in such a short time, from being seen as primitive newcomers to galactic society to helping save the Concordate from defeat. What will you do now, Captain Wright? The Admiral asked. Eleanor looked at her crew, Garcia, Palmer, Wilson, and all the others who had followed her on this incredible journey. We'll go home for a while, she said. Then we'll be back. There's a whole galaxy out there, and I think humans and the Concordate have a lot to learn from each other. As the Defiant jumped to FTL heading back toward Earth, Eleanor thought about the saying that had guided her throughout this war. Sometimes the unthinkable solution is the one that changes everything. Humanity had proven its worth among the stars, and this was just the beginning.